The moment my sister threw her drink in my face, I understood that some family roles only survive because one person keeps accepting them. My name is Yvette Harper. I am 26 years old. I had spent most of my adult life being dependable in ways that rarely looked dramatic from the outside. I worked long hours, lived below my means, paid attention to details, and learned early that stability usually comes from boring choices repeated often. In my family, none of that impressed anyone. They still spoke to me like I was the youngest child who should be grateful to be included. My mother insisted on hosting my birthday dinner at her house in Upper Arlington. I arrived early because if I did not help, things would be late, tense, or unfinished. I seasoned the roast, set the table, chilled the drinks, and wiped the counters while my mother moved around pretending she did not need help. Before leaving my townhouse in Worthington, I had put on a cream silk blouse I bought for myself the week before. It was not wildly expensive, but I had hesitated over it longer than I should have. Buying something just because I liked it still felt unfamiliar. Sandra arrived last, as usual. My sister was 12 years older than me and carried herself like the room adjusted around her. She kissed the air near my cheek, looked me over, and said, "Well, someone dressed up tonight." I smiled and kept serving plates. 3 weeks earlier, I had refused to co-sign another refinance loan for her. She said it was temporary relief. I said no because I had heard temporary before. Since then, every text from her had sounded offended. Dinner started stiffly. Sandra commented that my blouse looked ambitious. She asked if young people now believed having a salary made them experts. She wondered aloud whether working too much had made me cold. My mother kept telling everyone to eat. I should have left then. Instead, I stayed seated while Sandra lifted her glass of dark red punch and looked directly at me. She tipped her wrist and sent the drink across the table onto my chest. Cold liquid ran down the silk. Ice cubes struck my plate and dropped into my lap. "Now you look cheap enough." My mother gave a nervous laugh. "Yvette, please don't ruin your own birthday over a joke." No one moved. No one corrected her. I stood up, dabbed at the blouse with a napkin, and said I was going home. The drive back to Worthington was quiet. Once inside my house, I changed clothes, logged into my banking account, and permanently canceled Sandra's emergency credit card. Then, before midnight, I made one more call. After I canceled the card, I sat at my kitchen table in the dark and realized the drink had not been the real insult. It was only the latest version of something much older. Sandra was 38 and had spent most of her adult life chasing the picture of success instead of the work behind it. She always had a new handbag, a new restaurant to recommend, and old balances still unpaid. She and Rick bought a house in Upper Arlington that looked impressive from the street. But every few months there was some crisis tied to the mortgage. Taxes, repairs, or another bill they had pushed aside. Rick had a talent for disappearing without leaving the room. He rarely argued, rarely decided, rarely stopped anything. When Sandra overreached, he became quiet until someone else solved it. Usually that someone was me. My mother excused nearly all of it because Sandra lived 10 minutes away and visited often. If Sandra brought groceries once, my mother called her generous for a month. If I paid a bill quietly, it became invisible by the next week. Proximity can look a lot like devotion when no one wants to examine it too closely. I was the younger sister, so in their minds, I remained younger in every category. They treated my progress like a lucky streak that would pass. Years earlier, when Sandra ignored a final utility notice, I paid it before the lights were cut off. During one of Rick's layoffs, I sent grocery money every Friday for almost 2 months. When their furnace failed in January, I covered the repair because my nephew was in the house and I couldn't ignore that. I never asked to be thanked. I also didn't expect to become their backup plan. What they never respected was simple. I wasn't helping because I had extra money. I was helping because I had discipline, and discipline costs more than people think. A year before my birthday dinner, Sandra called me crying so hard I could barely understand her. Between breaths, She said they had nothing left after Rick's hours were cut again. She said the pantry was nearly empty, the gas tank was low, and she didn't know how to get Tyler to school the next morning. Still, hunger is hard to ignore, even when it comes through someone unreliable. I added Sandra as an authorized user on one of my secondary credit cards. I told her clearly: food, gas, medicine, real needs, nothing else. She answered fast: I know. Yvette, I wouldn't abuse that. For the first few months, the charges looked exactly as promised: grocery stores, fuel stations, a pharmacy in Upper Arlington. I wanted to believe we had found a reasonable solution, and wanting that made me lazy. 2 weeks before the dinner, my accountant, Daniel, called during a routine review. He spoke carefully, the way people do when they know money is never just money. There's a pattern on that secondary account you may want to see. I opened the statements while he stayed on the line. Salon appointments in Dublin, boutique purchases at Easton Town Center, steakhouse dinners, a weekend spa booking in Hocking Hills. The charges were spaced out just enough to hide the pattern. I felt embarrassed before I felt angry. I had built rules, then ignored whether they were being followed. Sandra hadn't used my help to survive. She had used it to keep pretending. I said nothing that day. I closed the statements, thanked Daniel, and went back to work with a tight jaw and a clear mind. By then, I knew the next open act of disrespect would be the last one I financed. 2 years before the dinner, Sandra called with a calmer voice than usual, which should have warned me something was rehearsed. She said real estate was picking up again and she needed a respectable vehicle if she wanted serious clients to trust her. According to her, people judged agents in the first 10 seconds. What she didn't say immediately was that no lender wanted to finance her. Her credit score had been dragged down by late payments, revolving balances, and promises that had expired months earlier. She asked me to meet her at a dealership near Polaris Parkway just to advise. I went because I was still trying to help without fully helping, a mistake I made often back then. I expected to see a practical sedan or small SUV. Instead, parked near the front glass wall, was a used black Porsche Macan with polished wheels and a price tag that made my jaw tighten. Sandra smiled like we had both won something. Isn't it perfect? Clients will take me seriously the second I pull up. I stared at her. You said you needed transportation. This is theater. She folded her arms. Image matters. You wouldn't understand because your job hides behind a desk. That line nearly sent me out the door. I should have left. Instead, I asked the sales manager for details, then stepped aside and thought about the mess that would follow if I walked away. Sandra would cry to our mother, blame me for sabotaging her future, and create another month of noise. So I made the compromise that taught me more than any argument had. I bought the vehicle outright in cash, but I kept everything in my name: title, registration, insurance, roadside coverage, and both spare keys, legally and financially. It was mine. Sandra promised monthly repayments. The first came late, the second was partial, and after that, excuses replaced money. Still, she drove through Upper Arlington like success had finally arrived. Tyler borrowed it. My mother bragged about Sandra doing so well. Sometimes the most expensive thing a person buys is a lie everyone agrees to repeat. When I got back to my townhouse in Worthington, the house was quiet in the steady way only an empty home can be. I went straight upstairs, unbuttoned the cream blouse, and peeled the damp fabric away from my skin. The red stain had spread across the front and into the seams. It wasn't about clothing anymore. That blouse had been a small promise to myself. I had spent years paying other people's emergencies, fixing other people's mistakes, delaying simple things I wanted because someone else always needed something first. Buying it had meant I was finally learning to value my own life without asking permission. Sandra knew that more than she realized. She hadn't only thrown a drink, she had tried to put me back in the place where I existed to be diminished. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the hurt settle. Once it did, something steadier replaced it. I logged into my banking account and permanently removed Sandra as an authorized user. No freeze, no temporary hold, No warning call she could cry her way through. Then I called a licensed transport company I knew through a commercial account at work. The manager, Leon, asked one question. Do you have title and identification? I have both. I emailed the documents within minutes and paid the overnight fee. Close to midnight, I parked half a block from Sandra's house with the lights off. The street was still when Leon's flatbed arrived. They unlocked the Porsche, winched it up cleanly, strapped it down, and drove away without scraping a curb or waking a neighbor. I expected guilt. What I felt instead was relief so deep it almost embarrassed me. At exactly 8:40 the next morning, my phone lit up with Sandra's name. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. She was already shouting. My card was declined in front of everyone. Yvette. Then I came home and the Porsche is gone. Someone stole it. I already called the police. You need to fix this right now. Good morning to you too. Don't play games with me. She hung up before I could reply. I sat at the kitchen counter, took a slow sip, and realized how strange it felt not to rush toward someone else's emergency. By the time I drove to Upper Arlington, a police cruiser was parked outside her house. Two neighbors stood near their mailboxes pretending to be occupied. Curtains moved in nearby windows. She ran toward my car the second I stepped out. Thank God. Tell them the car is ours. Tell them there has been some mistake. Our car, I asked. Her face tightened. Don't do this here. Tyler was pacing near the driveway in athletic clothes, furious and red-faced. I had plans this morning, he snapped. You need to get my car back. I didn't answer him. One of the officers, a calm, middle-aged man named Officer Brennan, asked who Yvette Harper was. I raised my hand slightly. He looked down at his tablet. Ma'am, the plate on the reported vehicle comes back registered solely to you. Sandra stepped forward so fast he had to lift a hand. That can't be right. It's our family car. She helped us get it. I purchased it. I said, and I retained ownership. He nodded once, then turned back to Sandra. That means this isn't a stolen vehicle report. It's a private civil dispute regarding use of property. Tyler cursed under his breath. My mother, who had come outside in slippers and a robe, stood near the porch steps without speaking. She looked smaller than usual. Sandra's voice cracked. So anyone can just take a car from a driveway, Officer Brennan answered plainly. The legal owner can remove their own vehicle. Yes. Then he added, please don't call emergency services again without confirming the facts. Sandra looked around and saw the neighbors watching. Tyler stopped pacing. My mother lowered her eyes. In 1 minute, years of appearances began to unravel. People who build their identity on appearances often collapse fastest when truth becomes public. Sandra turned back to me, breathing hard. We are talking about this today. I agree, I said. At my house, with paperwork. For the first time in a long time. I wasn't the one walking into someone else's storm. I was standing outside it, watching where it would go next. They arrived at my townhouse just after 3 that afternoon. Sandra came in first without waiting to be invited properly. My mother followed with tight shoulders, and Tyler entered last, carrying the offended silence of someone who still believed inconvenience was injustice. Rick was not with them. I noticed that immediately and wasn't surprised. I led them to the dining table. In the center sat a plain manila folder. Most damage in families happens through ordinary things. Sandra pointed at it. I'm not here for paperwork. I want the keys and my card turned back on. Sit down, I said. She almost refused. Then sat. I opened the folder and slid the first stack toward her. Credit card statements, highlighted line by line. Grocery stores at first, then salon appointments, boutique charges, restaurant tabs, spa bookings, dates, totals, locations. That card was for necessities. I said, you used it for appearances. Sandra crossed her arms. I was under stress. So was I. I placed the next stack down. Insurance renewals for the Porsche, registration fees, maintenance invoices, proof of payment from my accounts. You told everyone you were handling that car. I said, "You weren't." Tyler leaned forward, then went still when I added another receipt. "The hoodie you wore at my birthday dinner. Easton Town Center. Charged to the same account." His face changed in a way I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Shame. My mother began crying quietly. "I knew she exaggerated sometimes," she said, staring at the table. "I just didn't want another fight. I didn't want her keeping the children from me." Sandra snapped toward her. "So now you're against me too." "No," my mother said weakly. "I'm tired." Sandra moved through every familiar stage. First anger, then tears, then accusations that I was humiliating her, then claims I thought I was better than everyone else. "This isn't humiliation," I said. Humiliation was having a drink thrown on me while everyone laughed. "This is accounting." The room went silent after that. Facts had done what arguments never could. They removed every hiding place. I looked at the three of them and realized something uncomfortable but freeing. I had not been trapped by their behavior alone. I had also been trapped by my refusal to name it. Once the silence settled, I closed the folder and kept my hands on top of it. Someone would cry, someone would blame stress, and I would end up fixing what they planned to repeat. "That ends today," I said. Sandra gave a short laugh that held no humor. "You love this, don't you?" "No," I said. "I hate that it took this long." I looked directly at her. "There will be no more loans, no more credit cards, no more co-signing, no more emergency transfers funding everything except emergencies." Her jaw tightened. "So you're abandoning your family?" "I'm refusing to finance dysfunction." That was the first time she had no quick answer. I told her if she wanted to keep the house in Upper Arlington, she needed to sell what she could, cut spending, and start earning consistently. The handbags, the unused memberships, the extra subscriptions, the dinners meant to impress people who were not paying her bills. Real numbers had to replace image. Then I turned to the empty chair Rick should have been sitting in. "If Rick wants dignity," I said, "he needs to stop disappearing whenever decisions get uncomfortable. Silence is not neutrality. It has cost all of you years." Tyler rolled his eyes, but there was less confidence in it than before. "And if Tyler wants respect," I continued, "he can earn it through work, reliability, and discipline, not through keys handed to him for a car someone else paid for." "That's enough," he muttered. "It's the first time it has been enough." My mother began crying again. "Yvette, families forgive. You can't just do this and move on." I softened my voice, but not my meaning. Forgiveness and access aren't the same thing. "Mom, I may forgive all of this one day. That doesn't mean I reopen the account, return the car, or keep pretending none of it happened." Sandra stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "You're selfish," she said. "Money made you cold." "No, being used made me clear." She stormed out. Tyler followed after a hard look he couldn't quite hold. My mother lingered a moment, then left without another word. I didn't chase any of them. When the front door closed, the house felt lighter than it had in years. I stood alone in the quiet and realized freedom can sound a lot like an empty room. The next 5 months were quiet. No one called with emergencies. No one asked me to transfer money before noon and pretend it was temporary by dinner. At first, the silence felt unnatural. Then it started to feel healthy. I heard updates in pieces, mostly through my mother when she stopped by on Sunday afternoons with store-bought muffins and a careful tone. Sandra had begun selling handbags and jewelry online. The country club membership was canceled after overdue fees became impossible to ignore. She was embarrassed. My mother said, I believed that. Shame had finally reached something she valued. Rick took evening warehouse shifts near Rickenbacker after his regular workday. I pictured him in steel-toe boots loading pallets under fluorescent lights and wondered whether exhaustion might succeed where comfort had failed. Tyler got a job at a burger restaurant on Bethel Road and started taking the bus to community college. The first time my mother mentioned it, she sounded offended on his behalf. By the second time, she admitted he was showing up on time and keeping the job. That was progress in a language our family rarely used. Their household budget became strict. Streaming services were cut. Takeout nearly disappeared, and the mortgage stayed current for the first time in a while. Then, on the first Monday of the next month, I received an electronic payment from Sandra for $200 with the note repayment. Another came 4 weeks later. The amounts were small. The consistency was not. My mother now visited me without requests, folded inside conversation. We talked about weather, work, neighbors, and ordinary things. Pride had been wounded in that house, maybe permanently. Responsibility had finally moved in. 6 months later, I spent my next birthday in German Village at a small brick restaurant with 2 close friends who never asked me to be anything except present. There was no tension at the table, no careful reading of moods, no forced laughter to prevent an argument. That afternoon, before I left home, a handwritten envelope had arrived. Sandra's name was on the front. Inside was the latest repayment check and a short note. She wrote that working for her own money had changed her. She said long shifts and honest bills had changed her. She apologized for the drink, for the lies, and for years of calling dependence family love. I believed she meant it. I also left the boundaries where they were. Some apologies deserve acceptance, but not restoration. Driving home beside the Scioto River lights, I understood something I wish I had learned sooner. Peace is not loneliness. Peace is what remains when guilt no longer decides your choices. Helping people can be beautiful, but if help requires your dignity, it is too expensive. If you have ever carried someone else for too long, I hope you remember that saying no can be an act of respect for yourself and even for them. Tell me if you have ever had to learn that lesson the hard way. When I got home, I placed Sandra's card in a drawer, turned off the lights, and slept deeply.